are events from Reddit. Events so scary, you wish they were only in your nightmares. Viewer discretion is advised.
The things that happen in prison are often far worse than anything you've seen on the news, anything you've seen on TV shows like 60 Days In, anything you can imagine. I was in the prison when a convicted sex offender came in. He was convicted for raping his 2 younger daughters. Rumor has it his one daughter, 14, videotaped him raping his younger daughter, and that's how the cops found out. You see, jail is where you go when you've been arrested. Prison is where you end up after the courts have sentenced you. We all have loved ones in prison, and they are often the ones that validate our inmate sentences. There is often no hiding. This SOB must have really messed with some people, because normally cases of that stature you'll never have a convict placed in the general population. But this guy was. As far as I know, other than some threats, nothing happened to him on day 1. Day 2 was another story. I'm not sure if he lied about what he was in for. However, you told people up front. All I know is it went bad for him really quick. 3 guys took him into cell, knocked him out cold, and have their way with them. And I don't mean sex. Well, maybe I do mean sex. I remember seeing a broom handle with a sock put over being shoved up inside him. I couldn't tell if it was shit or blood coming out, likely a mixture of both. While this was happening, the other lie beat him senseless. I know he was out because he wasn't reacting to any of it. There he was, left in a pool of blood and shit, basically to wake up on his own and try to put it all together. The guards didn't help him. They made him sit there and deal with it, while they got someone to come clean up. He must have begged and pleaded to be moved somewhere safe and secure, which didn't help because he came back the very next day. All they did was move him from one cell to another. This was the first of many attacks on him like this one. There is no helping the guy. I've heard some more stories, but this was the one that I saw with my own eyes. My grandpa was a warden at a state prison. He's always tell us stories. I started with him saying, "Now the story I'm about to tell you can't tell another soul. You hear me? And now I'm telling you, LOL." But this one was it, a convicted sex offender who came into his prison. This was back in the late 80s when as much technology was around, so it was easier for him to lie. This guy had gotten away with lying to the other inmates for months that he was in there on some other charges. Because of that, kid, fairly easy time. He fucked over the one guy you don't want to fuck with, the security guard. You see, the security guard was definitely overweight, and a lot of the inmates liked to make fun of him, for most of them in a playful manner. And as a security guard, you kind of have to let it happen, especially if it's just joking and fun. However, obviously there's something wrong with this guy. Wasn't quite right in the head, because when he made fun of them, he did it in almost an attacking, aggressive way. You could tell he wanted to be cool and fit in, but at the same time didn't really know what he was getting into. He ended up poking him in the belly at one point to saying, "What is that, a pillowcase?" To which the guard said, "If you ever do that again, I'll make sure you get your just deserved." Needless to say, this moron poked him again, and that's when the guard said something to the cellmate that he wished he never did. After you poked him, he said, "Don't you ever touch me again, you sick fuck. What are you in here for, the child molestation?" Silence fell over the prison floors. Everyone looked at him as he denied it. But that day the security guard sentenced that prisoner in a way no judge could. Now I don't know if my grandpa told this story to make the security guards look more important than they actually are, or what, but he told me another story that I always assumed went along with this one. One of the sex offenders that came into his prison got tied down, grabbed by the package, and with whatever shive they had, cut his junk right off of him. He always said what a mess it was to clean and how repulsing it was. The crazy part is the man survived. Justice will be served. More prisons, they seem to be creating safer areas for sex offenders. I guess the last few decades has been clear. If you're a sex offender in prison, things don't go well for you. It's a lot of prisons now have designated area for people who are sex offenders, child molesters, convicted rapists, but that's still not enough to prevent them from getting what they deserve. My sister-in-law works at one of the prisons and says how messed up it is, not because there are these grandiose crazy things happen with them, But it's the little things that add up over time. It's those things that if you live in the moment every single day, you would go crazy, but when you hear about it, you don't think too much of it. Things like intentionally forgetting to feed people for a day. Just slowly feel like you're starving yourself to death and there's nothing you can do. It's something that can wear on you over time. Or when they do feed them, it seems to be a lot of the sex offenders get food poisoning. So even when they're eating, they're not necessarily getting nutrition. Some of the guards, especially the ones on the overnight watch, might make a loud banging sound once in a while to disrupt people's sleeping patterns. Some of those guards might also turn lights on and off at all times of the day so that you never feel rested. No one of those things seem to be too crazy. But when you live in a state of starving, sleep-deprived, mental abuse, and you stretch that over a period of time of months if not years, you tell me how long they would last. Most of the time they get tortured. It's not instantly. Sometimes they are there for a few days, but the inmates will wait for the guards to just finish their shift. To be clear, it's anyone with crimes against women and children. Doesn't always have to be rape. The guards typically tell the initiates what people who's in here on sex offenses. A lot of the guards don't want these people in prison, so they let the inmates deal with it. It's the sounds when you are in there and you hear someone's head being smashed open rapidly that is nauseating. It's pretty common, to the point a lot of prison will actually give tattoos to people who kill inmates that were convicted as sex crimes. Even the guards have terms they know. Things like KOS, or kill on sight. Basically, when someone comes in who has committed that crime, they get a cause. I've heard other prisons will tell the sex offenders about this and they will give them a choice. Either die in prison or become a rat. I don't have proof at this point, but knowing what I know about prison, it makes sense. This is from one specific maximum security federal prison. There are so many different types of jails and prisons with varying levels of security and huge variables in population type. Obviously, what I experienced doesn't mean that every single other jail and prison is like this. When you first get there, your counselor will ask you if there's any reason that you can't walk the yard or be in general population. This is usually where you make the decision to do your time in the SHU all alone, or take your chances out with everyone else. You do need to have a good reason though. Child molester, gang issues, there's a hit on you from the last place you stayed, you're a snitch, etc. When you get settled in, the shot caller from your race will approach you. You're told something like this: you have 1 week to get us your paperwork so we can make sure you're not a chama or have no Rule 35s. If you don't provide this in a week, we'll kill you. Here's a toothbrush, some snacks, some soap. Let me know if you need anything. Chama equals child molester. Rule 35 equals reduced sentence for snitching on someone. So, you show them your paperwork, and if you're clean, you're good to go. If you don't show paperwork, or you're not clean, you will be killed within the next week. For some reason, new guys do not take this seriously. They either don't produce their paperwork, or they actually produce it knowing that there's less than desirable stuff on there. What happens to them? Stabbed 27 times, all in a matter of seconds. Face head stomped on so hard until it just cracks open and gunk leaks out. Mouth jaw shattered with a pool stick or pool ball. 2 guys killed in about 60 seconds by a tiny Mexican holding just a bocce ball. Native Americans pretend like it's all good. 10 of them go into the sweat lodge for religious reasons. Only 9 come out. 10th guy had a clean gash in his head from a shovel. Cellmate owned a guy with a bed sheet to make it look like suicide. Why do these guys take chances with trying to be in general population? Because the SHU sucks. You're by yourself. No TV. 3 showers a week. No access to things like the prison barber. Limited access to phones. Video visitations. Constant video monitoring to prevent suicide. And every 18 months they ship you to a new prison. If you're looking at 40 years for child rape, that can be a long time to live in those conditions. Sometimes guys will stay in general population knowing that they will get killed simply because they don't want to be there but can't commit suicide in the SHU. I've been in a few times and it's never good. I've seen guys beat down near to death, choke out the shampoo bottles, shove in their asses. I have seen them kept on the block for days to be starved and extorted. And I also work in the kitchen where when the trays for PC, protective custody, were made, we and guards spit on them, threw the shit on the floor, pretty much anything you can imagine. A few places weren't as harsh because it was short-timers who weren't gonna risk too much, but the higher the security, the worse they get it. But nowadays they pretty much get their own prisons so they aren't assaulted and killed. I was talking to a prison guard at a party a while back. He had some seriously screwed up stories from when he was working in a sexual predator's prison. They have to be separated because the general population would murder these people if they knew what they did. A lot of sex was happening. A lot of rape was happening. AIDS and diseases were floating around. He thought they were animals and they acted like ones. He had to pull prisoners off each other still balls deep. One prisoner pulled out both of his eyes because of a mental illness that was never treated. He raped a grandmother. If they are smart, nothing. Every sex offender has the opportunity to live in their own division. No one forces them into general population. Same goes for gang-related members. If they feel the other gang members will kill them, they have a chance to serve their sentence in a facility where they can't be easily harmed. Problem is some sex offenders don't believe it is bad in Gen Pop, or they are scared and don't want to speak about it. That's when things go bad. Prison inmates are some of the most creative people. Truly, especially the guys who have spent most of their life in the cell. They come up with ways to make things, create things, and find out information almost no one else can. Each prison in each state is a little different. Some prisons are worse than others. Some prisons are not that bad. The inmates are not as violent as others. The problem is when you have a violent prison and you put them into a place like that. I have felt for years the federal government should make it mandatory that all sex offenders have their own division, but they haven't made that the case countrywide yet. Wonder why? One of my inmates on my floor killed his bunkmate with a pair of shoestrings. He honestly wasn't a bad criminal. He was in and out of prison a few times for crimes like break and entering, fraud, non-violent crimes. So when I heard he killed his bunkmate, even I was shocked. We used to eat together when I was serving my time. He seemed pretty level-headed and never really started trouble with anyone. Rumor has it that his bunkmate told him about the crime he committed, and it was against an underage girl. He tried to get the bunkmate to stop talking about it, and when he didn't, he beat him up and killed the guy with his own shoelaces. Strangled to death. I never was able to speak to him again, but he pleaded guilty to murder. Rightly so. I feel he should get a pass. If you knew him, he was a good guy. Ran with the wrong crowd, and whatever that man said to him must have really set him off. Funny thing is, the prison banned shoelaces shortly after this.